Okay, it's 10 o'clock, 10:01, so we will start now. Right, and yeah, I think I have my speakers here. Some of them are still not on the video. Okay, so yeah, hi everyone, a very good morning and welcome to the 29th edition of the Tuesday Talk Live by Place Borneo, a platform for us to share ideas, information and solutions. Our partner is TV Sarawak and you can catch our show live from their Facebook page. My name is Mona Abdul Manap and I'll be your host. And today's edition is a special one. So if you notice, we run every 2 weeks, but we decided to have one more this week after last week's edition because the topic is so important right now that we must discuss it. We must. So the topic today is COVID-19 variants and vaccine efficacy. So I'm just going to share something I read. It's a CDC presentation and it says that the Delta variant is about as transmissible as chickenpox, with each infected person on average infecting 8 or 9 others. So that sounds a bit scary, but excuse me, but today we'll find out if it really is that dangerous. Yes, it's very infectious, but is it really that dangerous? So today we've got a few of our speakers. I'm just gonna go back to this view. Yep, so you can see them on the screen right now. We have all our speakers who have been with us on past editions. We've got Dr. Christopher, Dr. Ashley, and Dr. Jasmine, and they're the experts in this. So I'm not going to talk so much today, so I'm going to leave it all to them. Dr. Christopher is an infectious disease specialist and was head of infectious services for the Ministry of Health Malaysia from 1991 to 2019. Hi, Dato', thank you for being with us again today. Dr. Ashley is currently with University of Malaysia, Sarawak Unimas, and has been the Phase 1 coordinator for medical program at HMS for 8 years and also the head of molecular and medical genetics unit. So he was also with us quite recently actually. So hi, Dr. Ashley. Dr. Jasmine is with University Malaya and is a senior lecturer at the Institute of Biological Sciences in Faculty of Science, specializing in virology and microbiology courses. So you'd also be interested to know that her current research interests include host pathogen interactions. That's what's happening right now. Virus surveillance, also what's happening right now. Emerging infectious diseases and antiviral studies involving respiratory viruses, specifically influenza virus. So that's exactly what we are facing right now in the whole world. Okay, so we're not going to go through the usual introduction by the speakers, and we're going to dive right in because you know them already. And a reminder to all of you, if you're on Zoom, you can put your questions on the Q&A. If you're on YouTube or on Facebook, just type them on the chat box, and as we go along, we're going to pick them up. So I'm going to start with Dr. Christopher. Dr. Christopher, can you share with us what's the scene right now? You're doing your rounds at Sungai Buloh, and you're a bit more aware of what's happening in West Malaysia. Let us know what's happening and your take on it.
Thank you, Mona. Good morning, everyone. I think all of us know, we have seen the images on social media pages as well as in newspapers. Things are very bad in the Klang Valley. So much so that we have now a special task force headed by the current Deputy DG of Health to address the very serious problems at our hospitals. If you go to hospitals like Hospital Kuala Lumpur, Hospital H-Star in Klang, for example, they will find patients with COVID waiting at the emergency departments. We have wards that are filled to the brim with patients. We have patients who require ventilators, and we are struggling to find them enough ventilators to put them on. Of course, I think the number of deaths that we see reported by MOH every day speaks for itself. Yesterday, we had 216 or so deaths reported yesterday. The bad news is I think the numbers will continue to be high for quite a while. So for the other parts of the country that are not feeling that major brunt, I hope they don't. I hope Mona, you in Sarawak will continue to stay controlled because you went through a bad spell earlier as well. But currently what's happening in Klang Valley is even worse than what happened in Sabah last year. So we really do not want to get there. The good thing is, and that's what we are talking about now, two very important factors may have contributed to our position now. On the bad side, or what is not good, of course, the variants have changed the dimension of the pandemic. We all talk about Delta, and I'm sure both Ashley and Jasmine will talk a lot more about Delta afterwards. But on the good side, we have now, compared to 1 year ago, we have the vaccines. And that's what we are talking about that now today, looking at the balance between how the vaccines versus the variants. So that really changes our how we move forward from this. I think how these two interplay, the variants against the vaccine, will help determine how well we do in the months ahead.
Okay, thanks, Dato. I forgot to unmute myself. So when we talk about the Delta variant, I think everyone's worried about that, you see, because, recently we read in the news, someone forwarded to me this article saying that half of those positive cases in Sarawak, actually more than half, was Delta variant. So everyone was like, oh no, it's already here in the community. But before we talk about Delta variant, maybe we want to know how the variants came about, and then talk about Delta. Maybe Dr. Jasmine, you want to start on this one?
All right, thank you, Mona. Hi, good morning, everyone. So when we talk about variants or about variants on any viruses, so we're talking about mutations, right? So as the COVID-19 pandemic continues, you are going to see a lot of new variants of SARS-CoV-2 virus pop up, and some lead to increasing infections. So how viruses actually mutate largely has to do with how they make copies of themselves and their genetic material. So we are talking about RNA viruses, which they have error. They don't have, most of RNA viruses do not have error correcting mechanism. But for coronavirus, it has a certain degree of error correction. So they have lower mutation rate compared to other RNA viruses, for example, influenza virus. And when you have mutations, you have three possibilities. The mutation can do nothing, they can impair the virus, or they can even facilitate the virus replication. So in terms of evolution of virus mutation, they follow the law of the jungle, right? What it means is that the strongest variant prevails. All right, so coming back to the case of coronavirus, so it means that the more infectious variants that we have suppresses the less infectious form of the virus, because the aim of the virus or the microorganism is to persist in the environment, and they want to maintain transmission. And when you have high population of people that is naive or have little immunity towards these variants, then these variants are going to get dominant and spread effectively. So this is what we see in high population area or countries like India, Brazil, and South Africa, where the mutations that are now widespread actually arose from there, and that is where the percentage of the people vaccinated was very, very low. Okay, back to you, Mona.
So it means that in fact when they mutate, they are actually trying to live better with the host, with us humans. So they don't want to kill us because they need us, they need our body to survive. So in fact,
Yep.
in time, the virus will actually be weaker in that sense. That means it will not have a lot of serious symptoms on us. Is that correct?
Yes, you are correct.
Okay. So that's the reason why Delta is more transmissible or more infectious, but it not necessarily mean that it's deadlier than the previous mutations or variants.
Yes, that is correct. Based on the data that we see, like in the UK and the United States, where high population, and also in Israel, where high population of people are vaccinated, although they are seeing a surge of hospitalization cases, but they don't see a high number of deaths in those countries.
Okay, that's good. And then there's a lot of question about how the vaccines are actually effective against one is the actual virus itself, and now with the variant and saying that it's actually less effective and you can infect. I mean, you're not saying that when you're vaccinated you cannot get the virus. You can get infected, but it should actually lessen the symptoms. But right now you see people getting infected even I think twice. One of our Rotarians, he got infected I think a month ago, and then now he's positive again, and he's already vaccinated. So Dr. Ashley, maybe you want to talk about that.
Maybe I'll continue from what Dr. Jasmine left.
Yep.
Thanks again, Mona. And good morning, everyone. Something that when we want to compare the variant with the vaccine, we need to understand one thing, what actually happens when you are infected for the first time with the virus particle, with SARS-CoV-2. Now, what happens is that I think we established it last year, but I'll try to recap and how the virus gets into our cells. And what happens is that it needs a door, basically a door to enter the cells. And how it unlocks the door is by using the spike protein. This I remember you saying that I didn't know anything about spike protein, and now everyone is very well educated regarding spike protein, and the door is actually called ACE, and I don't want to use the long name. It's just called ACE2. Now, what happens is that when the virus locked into that door and it starts opening, and then it goes in, and that's when what Jasmine just mentioned, all the reaction of replication and so on, where the mutation rate is there, and that's how we got a variant. Now, why do I talk about this? The door is that this is where the thing becomes, once it's mutated, it becomes enhanced probably. The transmissibility of the variant becomes good because the key becomes more effective, and it can actually sort of like stabilizes the interaction between the particle and the host cells, and that's one of the contributing factor, and they are trying to work out that mechanism of the key and lock is more to it, because not only just attach, and then there are a lot of other little things that goes on within that interaction that actually contributes to how a variant is becoming better at what it's doing. So these are the contributing factors, and there are many more factors that we are unaware that what it actually contributes and what makes it more infectious. Now it's sort of like we worked out why is it highly transmissible, but to work out why is it infectious, we're still working on it, but we have some idea what it does. So that's why we have it. Now, one thing we have to understand is all these things that what Jasmine mentioned and what I'm mentioning is that it's going to happen randomly. The virus is not a very intelligent being that it can actually say that I want Delta. Like what it says, the fittest survive, and it comes to Delta, and Delta seem to be. So they do it randomly, and they happen to get this Delta variant. One of the articles actually mentioned the Delta variant compared to the Wuhan variant. There are critically in the spike protein itself, there are 10 mutation hotspots. And that's what makes it different from the parent strain from Wuhan. So that would explain why. And this might happen anywhere, and it might come up. So the other question that people might wonder is that will we have more variants? It's certainly the possibility is there. And how we can actually cope with it is by vaccination.
There's one interesting question that just came in. If there are many variants out there, is there a possibility for these variants to combine and form another more or less dangerous variant? Is that possible?
Okay. What Jasmine mentioned earlier regarding the replication error, this is an inherent kind of value of that mechanism, no? That when during the process of replication, copying your nucleic acid, the error rate is there. Maybe what basically it does is that when you have the replication going on, the enzyme that actually does that process makes an error. Instead of putting, there are only four alphabets that required for the replication process, which is A, T, G, and C. Now, and they have to always match A with T, G with C. And the matching process something might go wrong. So that's how the error becomes. Instead of putting an A, it puts a G there. So it's supposed to be A, then now it's become G. And somewhere else, it's supposed to be C, and it puts a T there.
So that's a mutation.
That's a mutation. That's what the mutation is. And this is done by the enzyme, So it's built in, even we ourselves in our body now, we have that error. But what we have is that we have a defense mechanism for it. It's called DNA repair enzymes. So in like what Dr. Jasmine mentioned earlier, the RNA viruses have a very higher rate of mutation. But for some reason, this particular RNA virus, the SARS corona family, they have some kind of a very minimal proofreading mechanism. So that's how now, to answer the question whether they can combine two things together, now that is a pure random process. So if it at all acquires many different things to it, that's not smart. It's just randomly it would have happened.
So it is possible.
Yes. I want to jump in as well. So because coronavirus is totally different than influenza, because influenza is a segmented virus, so you have 8 different segments of its genome, whereas coronavirus is just one. So with segmented virus, yes, what we call when the question asked is recombination or genome reassortment. So this is a common thing in viruses like influenza, but for coronavirus, it's super rare to happen. But when you have high replication rate going on in one cell, then yes, it might happen. But again, like Dr. Ashley said, it's going to be a rare occurrence and it's totally random. We are not sure how they're going to do it, how it happens and why it happens. Usually it's just a rare occurrence.
And Mona,
yeah,
maybe
go ahead, Dato'.
Just at one point before I forget, old man here, I will forget if you say it now. These two young people must run so fast. But I just want to add on whatever Ashley said just now, and I agree it's a random act of nature, but we are not totally helpless with it. We can actually cut down its opportunity to mutate. Mutation can only occur if there's replication. If there's no replication, they cannot mutate. And of course, as Ashley mentioned, one way is to vaccinate while waiting for vaccination rates to go up. And it will take some time, so that it doesn't happen overnight. We still have to go back to the public health measures to control its spread. For example, in Selangor and Kuala Lumpur now, we wish the vaccination rates will go to the max to 80-90% tomorrow, but that's not going to happen tomorrow. It's going to take another month or maybe even more. But time being, therefore, our public health measures still work. As long as there's a lot of replication in the society, in the community, the risk of having a new variant is higher. And that is something we can do. And that's important that in Malaysia, let's not have a variant named after Malaysia like that. So we got to keep our rates in the community down. Yeah, I just wanted to add that point.
Okay, and Dato, since you're talking, I'm just going to ask you, since you're also doing rounds in Sungai Buloh, and I'm sure you've observed a lot of Delta variant cases. What are your observations on them, and symptoms-wise, seriousness?
The sad thing is, in Selangor, the number of people, the older folks are getting vaccinated, of course, because they started the vaccination earlier. So a lot more of the older folks have been vaccinated. In the earlier months, we saw mostly older people or people with a lot of comorbidities coming in very ill in our ICUs. But I must say the last 1 or 2 months, it has been difficult to do rounds because we're seeing younger people in their 40s and 50s. Yesterday, there was the 31-year-old woman who passed away. I've done it for so many years, but telling the husband that his 31-year-old wife died, it doesn't get easier, unfortunately. And we are seeing that. We see a 48-year-old woman struggling with COVID, and I'm not sure whether she can pull through. And you turn on this side, you see a 52-year-old Chinese gentleman who looks very fit and no comorbidities and now struggling on the ventilator. We are seeing younger people with very little comorbidities get very sick. Now, this is driven partially by the vaccination program because we select out all the older people and the comorbidities and we are getting more and more vaccinated. What is left to vaccinate tend to be the younger people. So they are therefore more prone to get it. And I do believe Delta has played a role. In terms of search numbers, no question. We know that Delta drove the numbers way up everywhere in the world it landed on. And to some extent, this also added to the outcome of COVID cases. It's not just the virus killing us, but it's also our inability to look after the large number of patients. I mean, if you go to our general hospitals, they are packed now. Has the standard of care dropped for each individual patient? I think it's not. It would be naive to say it's not. I wish to say, we still get the best of care like our ICU cases got 1 year ago or 2 years ago. But with the numbers they are now, with our ICU patients spilling over, with our general wards having to ventilate people, forget the general wards, our emergency department having to ventilate people, obviously we are not getting optimal care. And this also may add to the higher mortality rate. So it's not just the virus, it's how we are coping with the virus as well.
I'm just gonna draw on a few of the things you said just now. Some people were more serious, and then there were some deaths as well. Were these vaccinated cases, or
most just like in other parts of the world, most of them were either not vaccinated or just had their first dose. There were very few that had both fully vaxxed. That means 2 weeks beyond their second dose. Not many. I think KKM also announced it a couple of days ago. But in Sungai Buloh, that's what we see.
Okay. Right. So we're going to talk about the vaccines, and later on we'll talk about the efficacy of the different types of vaccine. But maybe before that, how would the vaccine actually help us to, protect us from the virus, from the variants? And perhaps Dr. Ashley or Dr. Jasmine, you want to start on this one? Dr. Ashley, you can go first.
Okay. Yeah, I think the vaccine, I think we discussed this the last time, but what it does and all that. And like I said, most of the vaccine, if not all, they all target the spike protein. And I have not heard any other segment of the virus that has actually been targeted. But since it is targeted to the spike protein, it is trying to recognize the threat as early as possible once the antigen enters into our system. No? And that's one thing to make sure that you can have that available. So and we all know by now, I think even the people who are watching, what are things that vaccine promises, and that is very clear. To add on to that, now we are looking at, since the variants are in question now, we are looking at the variants are there, so it can minimize or reduce or even prevent that. But to add on something else, if some of the patients are in, I think Dr. Chris can actually go more on this. If category 3 and more, 4 or 5, that patients, whether they are some kind of, will they show some kind of response to the treatment that they're going to give, the antiviral drugs that they're going to give them, whether they will be able to cope with that, or at all, whether they do need a longer period or shorter period of being on the ventilators and no oxygen support and so on. But eventually we want to reduce the number of deaths. So these are the things that we need to consider now, instead of just looking at the numbers, and saying that there are so many people being infected. It's alarming, yes, but then we shouldn't be too worried about the numbers, but rather than looking at the qualitative aspect of post this one. I think I also need to discuss something maybe later regarding this, is about the post of infection, of COVID coming back, but for the time being, I think when we discuss the vaccine and the variants, these are the things that we need to look at the parameters. And also that very good that Dr. Chris has actually mentioned that the facility where this problem is happening, they are looking at the data of whether people are vaccinated or not, and whether the death is there, because that is very important data, because that will actually, when the data is made aware to the public, then the confidence may at least be better. I think to me personally, KKM need to come forward and show us the data saying that the people who are dying, these are the numbers who have already been vaccinated, first dose or second dose, and some of them are not unvaccinated. So these will actually make the public know that vaccination is important, and they will go to the PPV center to get vaccinated. That's my.
Okay, I think we will have a lot of discussion on the different efficacy of the different types of vaccines. But before that, we have one question which I think is related to what you just mentioned. This is from Dr. John Chan, your best friend. What is the difference between antibody and T-cell immunity, and how are vaccines designed to trigger one more than the other?
To me personally, this is very close heart to Jasmine's field of expertise.
Go ahead, Dr. Jasmine.
It's about humoral versus cellular immunity, and it's a 101 basically it's biology.
No, actually, this is yours. Antibodies. We were talking about this before, right? Yes, so this is your field.
And the thing is that, what is the difference? You're talking about the difference, meaning that one is looking at the antibody, and you're getting the what we call humoral immunity. Humoral immunity, what John, if you're listening to it, humoral immunity, and the other one is the long term. I would say it's a cellular based immunity. When this thing, and actually I was waiting to bring up this issue when we talk about mix and match. There's very good data from UK published very recently this year. When they actually mix and match the vaccine, which I was in doubt in the earlier stage, but now I think the data is coming in and then showing that that mixing of the vaccine has actually given us some good hope on regarding fighting this pandemic, because it's triggering both the cellular and the humoral immunity, which is good, because that's what we want. The T-cell base is more long-term. That means it remembers longer, whereas the antibody, the first vaccination actually is that your body system will start getting all this antibody prepared, and it'll start expressing which one is the best ones and so on. That is called humoral. And rather, when it goes to the cellular antibody, immunity, that's when the T cells are involved. I hope I've answered that. If you want to add something, Jasmine?
No, that's true. So antibodies are largely affected by mutations. I just want to add something. But T cells like CD4 and CD8s are not as affected as antibodies when there are mutations. So when we are talking about protection of the vaccine, people usually forget about this cellular part. They're always talking about the antibodies, but we have to bear in mind that the T cells are also working together, gaining memory for us when we are vaccinated.
Okay, I'm not going to go too much into the scientific part of it. I think it's reminding me of my Form 6 biology.
The take-home message is that a vaccine that triggers both this is useful.
Okay.
Useful. That's the take-home message from that.
Definitely, yeah.
So I think a lot of people will also be asking, they're talking about how Sinovac is less effective. People are circulating messages on WhatsApp, and I've seen on Facebook as well, they put the percentage of how it's less effective, especially against the Delta variant. And I recently read, somewhere that we still have about 14 million doses of Sinovac, and yet now we're going into Pfizer. Now, why is that? Maybe Dato, I see you smiling. Maybe you've got an answer for that.
Oh, I'm smiling because I don't want to answer that question. What's wrong with you? Next time when I'm smiling, I don't want to answer the question. Right? Well, I mean, jokes aside. I mean, all this, to be fair, every country had to book vaccines way in advance. All right, Japan is a very rich country, but we all know that they book vaccines much later for whatever reason. So they are, for a very developed country, their vaccination rates are relatively low, even with the Olympics going on there now. So to be fair, Malaysia, if we wanted to compete for the vaccines, had to book them way ahead. And of course, we are not the most powerful country or richest country in the world. There's a pecking order in how we get the vaccines. But kudos to KJ and the team. They managed to get a fair amount of vaccines. All right. You can argue whether it's fast enough or slow enough, but they did get the vaccines. But these vaccines had to come from various sources. Obviously, if we just had one source, and if something goes wrong with these vaccines, then we are in trouble. So it does make sense to get a lot. So Sinovac was up there, clearly, and Sinovac was for sale. I do agree that the initial data for Sinovac was lacking. It wasn't published in any impactful peer-reviewed journals for quite some time, unlike Pfizer and Moderna. So there were always a bit of concern whether it's all there. But in due course, it was published, and it does seem to do well. You might compare the figures between Pfizer and Sinovac and say, oh yeah, Pfizer is in the 90s, and Sinovac can be as low as 60 over, even 57%. But that is looking at effectiveness of preventing an infection. The more important thing, and I think we need to stress to everyone who's listening, the main impact of the vaccine is to keep you from being sick. That's number one, by far. All right. Unfortunately, if that happens, if it can keep you out of the hospital, it doesn't mean you won't get infected. And it doesn't mean you cannot spread it to somebody else. That part we need to be clear. I want to say it now so that later we can also talk to those who are vaccinated. There are still some things we need to do, even though you're vaccinated. But clearly, the main impact is to look at how it keeps people away from hospitals and away from dying. And Sinovac's data is still pretty good. Is it as good as Pfizer's or the other mRNA vaccine? Well, unless there's a head-to-head comparison, it's really not quite difficult to say, because the variants come at different times. You cannot look at a study done last year and now, even in the same country, because now in Malaysia we have Delta. 1 year ago we had no Delta. So the results may not look the same. So to be fair to each company. So I think we need to look at the most current data in terms of Delta. And you're right, the amount of Sinovac data on Delta is not that much. But based on the real life data from, let's say, a country like Chile used a lot of Sinovac. I think, if not mistaken, almost completely Sinovac. Their effectiveness in terms of catching infection, I think is in their 60s. Okay, not that great. As you know, WHO's benchmark is 50% and above to be qualified as a vaccine. But it was effective in keeping people away from hospitals. I think it hit about 80%, close to 90%. So based on that kind of real life real-world data from Chile, there's some reassurance that, well, Sinovac is also decent enough. Now, the thing is this, vaccines are still hard to come by. I'm quite certain by next year or end of this year, there'll be a lot more vaccines around the world, and Malaysians may have a lot more options, yeah? But at the moment, I really urge Malaysians, take whatever vaccine is offered to you on the table. That is the best vaccine you've got. Clearly, unvaccinated does a lot worse than those vaccinated. I think that's the most simplistic message you come across. So I hope we don't lose out on that.
Okay. And there's a question that says, would we need a third dose for vaccination? So those like us, we've got Sinovac, the whole office is here, Sinovac. A lot of people got Sinovac or Pfizer or AZ. Do we need a booster shot, especially those Sinovacs or those AZs? Do they also need a booster shot? And if for us Sinovac, do we mix and match it with, other brands, or, later on we don't have Sinovac anymore? So what's, what's a good way to look at that? Dr. Ashley, Dr. Jasmine, do you have an answer for that?
Dr. Chris would be the best one, but I can just start with the thing is that with the data that came out of UK regarding the mix and match, it looks promising. Honestly, it looks promising, and it's kind of like by mixing, actually you're increasing the chances of getting what John just asked earlier regarding the cellular and the humoral immunity. So in that case, it'll be good news overall for all of us if we were to do a mix and match. But go back to a slight history. Why was there a mix and match done in Europe? Why? Because AstraZeneca sort of like had some very severe side effect. That is the reason, one of the reasons why they've actually started contemplating of doing a mix and match. And so now the mix and match works in that population. Whether it works on the Asian population, that's something for us to consider. Maybe KKM can have a better understanding of why, whether it's possible or not. That's my take on that question that you just forwarded to us.
Dr. Jasmine, any take on that?
Yeah, I want to add, also based on the data that we have, breakthrough infections, so these are infections that happen after you get fully vaccinated, are very, very low in vaccinated people. So that is why there's hesitant on giving a booster shots. And also, I think I recently read that the Biden administration is actually not considering booster for everyone, but only for those older people, 65 and above, and also immunocompromised people. Maybe that is something that we can think about and look upon, because that the rate of breakthrough infections are so low. And there's also a large data that we need to sift through and break apart, especially in terms of post-vaccination immunity, like Dr. Ashley said before, in terms of how much of antibodies we are producing, and also how much of it actually triggered the T-cell responses.
Dato', any take on this?
Well, I think it was great that Ashley brought up the fact that what happened in Europe. They did the mix and match not because they thought it was a good idea. They did the mix and match because they had no other options, isn't it? That's how it is. But of course, in the theory, and my two colleagues here will know it well, it has been used in the past, and it makes sense to boost both arms of the immune system, and it turns out to work very well. Data is, I agree, actually, I'm with you there. I think it's something that we should seriously consider. Of course, WHO hasn't said it yet. He still says mix and match may not be a best idea. Let's wait for more data. And I think the KJ and his committee is also saying the same thing, watching that space before they decide whether mix and match might be a good idea. My personal opinion, I think it's a good idea because logistically can be also a bit easier. Don't have to worry, go out to which PPV, it doesn't really matter. You have certain permutations, you can fit it. However, I think in other parts of the other countries in the region, Thailand is the best example. They are already doing mix and match, isn't it? Those who got Sinovac will get a Pfizer, preferably Pfizer or even AZ in the second dose. And there is data to support that. So I think each country will also have to look at their stockpile, because it all depends on what stock that they have and how they play with that stock. We do not want to waste, but still we want to give the best we can give to our people in the country. So that balance is there. So we mentioned about Sinovac. Well, I think the government has already announced that whatever Sinovac that has been bought by the federal government will be used. But after that, the focus will be mainly driven by Pfizer's purchase. That's what they have announced, isn't it, in the media? That's the way going forward. So they must be more confident to have a good supply chain for Pfizer's vaccines. They must be able. So going forward, it looks as if that's the way. But at the moment, looking at the data, I think mix and match might be a good thing to do. And when it comes to booster as well, just like what happened in America, I think we can focus on those who are most immunocompromised, the elderly, and those with severe immunosuppression status. Because these people tend not to mount as effective immune response to any vaccine anyway. We know that it's not new. So perhaps we can focus on that yet. One thing I want to mention about the booster dose, I'm sure you noticed Pfizer has come out and said, oh yeah, we need a booster dose. You might say, yeah, that's kind of money. Yeah, sure. Yeah. If I own Pfizer, I'll say we need a booster dose every 2 months. Something. No, I'm joking. Before Pfizer people kill me, I'm joking. But you get my point, all right? Now, I'm sure they have data and that they have shown it to the White House, but WHO has kept very quiet. And one obvious reason is this. WHO has been asking the rich countries, the ones who have overstocked their supply of vaccine, to donate those who are poor. Asia, okay, not so great, not so bad. But Africa is really, really bad, isn't it? Less than 2% vaccinated. So, so imagine if all the developing countries say, oh yeah, we need a booster after 6 months. Whatever supply coming from rich countries to be diverted to the very poor countries will stop short immediately. So I think that is also a major concern for WHO, because when they look at the planet as a whole, they must see the big picture. There are some people getting triple shots in 1 year and some people not getting at all. That's a bummer. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's good. That's a really good perspective that we can see, I think, globally in terms of what's happening in the whole world and why certain decisions are probably delayed on purpose. There's a question here by DK. Is it true that traveling to Europe or USA, it's only for those with Pfizer or Moderna vaccine, but Sinovac is not accepted? Dato', I'm looking at you.
You are the travel industry. The only place I go, I just go to work. It seems that way. Yeah, that was what I heard as well. But I'm not sure. Maybe the travel industry can give I don't know for sure. But that's what I heard. So I cannot add to the intelligent part of this discussion. I'm not sure. I have no plans for traveling. Sorry, Mona.
Yeah, I guess if it does happen, I'll find out, because I also got Sinovac. So I'll see where I can travel and I'll just go there, following my Sinovac trail.
You can go to China, I think.
Yeah, exactly. I'll go to China. Okay, there's one question here, I think, and this leads on to the next part of our discussion. This is a question by Shasitaran RK. Outside, there are many people selling self-test kit, ivermectin, etc. So here we go. So, and My Sejahtera has withdrawn the selling of self-test kit yesterday, as reported in online news. Dato', what is your advice to us? That is the question. I think it's a loaded question. There's a lot of discussions going on in that question itself. But let's handle the part where they've withdrawn the selling of self-test kit yesterday. So what's happening with that?
I think let's talk about the principles of it. A self-test kit is a good thing. Obviously, it's a good thing, but it must be used properly, because it can cause total chaos as well. If, let's say, the information chain is not put in the right place. At the end, public health must know what's happening. That's how they control it. Public health has no idea what's happening on the ground. They don't know who is positive, who is negative. It will be total chaos. I mean, to be fair to them, they'll not be able to do any contact tracing. However, on the other side of it, it is a good thing because if someone is tested positive, the access to the test is a lot easier than having to drive, make an appointment, or go to a clinic or something like that. You can just get it on the shelf, do it, and within minutes, you know your status. Of course, it's not foolproof. It's not as good as the PCR, but it's pretty good. The data has been reviewed by IMR as well, and also MDA has approved it as well. So it's a good thing. So you know. But once we know, it's the onus is on the individual now. These are in the individual now, because every kit, when I buy a kit, I bought a kit from a vendor. That's all, isn't it? Right? What my test result, nobody knows. The only person who knows is me when I do the test myself on my saliva. Nobody else will know. So if I choose to keep quiet, nobody will know. So that is of concern. But of course, we also hope that if somebody knows, if I know I'm positive, let's say, hopefully I will take precautions myself to make sure my family members and my people are safe. So I get to know faster rather than say, okay, I make an appointment, go and get a swab or get Gribbles to come to my house. Or it takes a bit of time. So it's not a bad thing. It's a good thing to me. But we just have to figure out how best to use it in our current public health measures, how to make it work. Because imagine now all the tests that is being done today, hundreds of thousands of tests being done, every result gets into the ministry. All right? Or a doctor knows about it. You do RTK, you're positive, negative, a doctor knows. If the doctor chooses not to notify, the onus is on the doctor. There is a law on that. We know that. The doctor can be prosecuted. But when you have self-testing, of course, we can't do that. I'm for self-testing. I think it's a good idea. For example, when our schools open, if the tests are cheap enough, can we test our kids on a regular basis? Saliva, for example, because they can't get vaccinated yet. For those who are below 12, my kids are already so grown up, so I don't think that way anymore. But for those with young kiddies, yes, they have a concern. The kids may not get very sick most of the time. But there have been some kids' deaths, unfortunately, as well. So maybe that's one area that you can use it to test on a daily basis. And if your kid happens to be positive today, straight away he doesn't go to school or something like that, we can take measures early. So self-testing is a good thing, but the onus and the responsibility seem to shift to the individual. So time being, I think KK wants to relook at it. I think they want to relook at it and see how best to implement it. Perhaps for certain settings.
Yeah.
Let's say work settings. Of course, having said that, if you vaccinate everyone, that's a good idea. But still doesn't mean you won't get infected as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
So perhaps,
Maybe they should have planned a bit more before they announced on MySejahtera and then now put it back again, right?
Oh, okay, I'll pass your suggestion to them.
Thank you, Dato'.
Yeah,
just
give me your full name and IC number out.
I will. Yes, Dr. Ashley, go ahead.
Since Dato' is actually talking regarding that, I think I did read through the question. There's an interesting one asking whether if a person tests it and then they realize that it's positive, but they are asymptomatic. So it's either category 1 or category 2 kind of group that they are, no? And I think the person is asking a very relevant question where what they should do in that situation. I think that's your advice to them. I think that would be quite useful, I guess.
If you're tested, if you do a self-test and you find yourself positive, all right, I think it's important. Number one, first thing immediately is to make sure you take precautions as of that time to limit your movement, to make sure the people around you are safe. Then you must put it into MySejahtera, or you notify the doctors who are involved with you, if you have a GP or whatever, if you're not sure. But if not MySejahtera, you put it into MySejahtera. When it's in MySejahtera, now not yet, isn't it? Then at least somebody can reach out to you. And when you click it in, As usual, when you put your RTK positive, they'll have that guideline will come out saying you must do this, do this, do this, do this, do this. So that helps a little bit. So take your own precautions straight away. Put into My Sejahtera, inform the doctor who's sort of in charge of you, if you have a GP or whatever, to get the advice, and start monitoring yourself. And those guidelines are already, isn't it, in public domain, what you must do, how you can check. Have a pulse oximeter, that's a good idea. And then, then if there's any deterioration, now everything is virtual. CAC now is virtual. If there's any warning signs or red flags, hopefully the system will bring you into the hospital setting. All right. It's the same as before, just that the testing now becomes faster and easier. But of course, the thing is, after a self-test, if the patient is asymptomatic, they probably will not do a PCR for you, because at the moment, the focus on PCR is really on those symptomatic. We don't have the time and turnaround time to do everyone. But the best thing is, if you have self-tested positive, we assume you are positive, you stay at home and monitor your symptoms. If your symptoms develop when you come to the hospital, I'm sure we will swab you straight away. We treat you and we swab you at the same time, because we do need confirmation as well. Because if you think you have COVID, maybe you have something else that's possible, isn't it? A pneumonia can come in many different forms by different organisms as well. So that's how I think it will come in.
Okay.
But somebody has to think through the whole process so that it fits into what we are doing as a country now.
Yes. And in fact, you answered part of the question by Joseph Ramanayar. What then would a vaccinated person who is infected, so if they did a test on themselves, whether they're vaccinated or not, and they find themselves to be positive, and so they are quarantined at home, maybe because they are asymptomatic, how do they treat the infection themselves? Is it similar to a flu? So like you said, you observe your own symptoms. What else do you do after that, or you just wait for it?
Well, I mean, the usual thing that all doctors will tell you: have enough rest, drink enough water, monitor your symptoms, temperature on a regular basis, a few times a day, monitor your effort tolerance, whether you get short of breath. If you have a pulse oximeter, which is great, now everybody has one, I think. I'm sure everybody has one. I'm sure you're wearing one now. Clip it on and monitor your pulse oximetry. There are guidelines now. I think KKM also came up with some YouTube videos to show how to use the pulse oximeter, and it tells you how low it goes before you sound the alarm or red flag. Send the red flag. Of course, My Sejahtera has that red flag thing. You can flag it, and hopefully the My Sejahtera system will pick you up. Right? Hopefully, the Ministry of Health or those people in charge of My Sejahtera will strengthen the whole system. At the moment, it's not foolproof. Obviously, there are problems as well. But hopefully they can strengthen that, and so that it becomes more effective. And if you need help will come faster. My concern, and I'm sure many of you see in Selangor, the most developed state, and we see a lot of brought-in deaths, isn't it? And I'm sure all of us feel very uncomfortable with that. It's sad, brought-in deaths. So we hope that if people call out for help, as their symptoms get on, we have to fix a system of people coming in to get them fast. We need that system. Otherwise, telling people to stay at home and monitor themselves, and when they find things are going wrong, the white knight doesn't come in. And I'm not saying that's the reason why they are brought in this. There can be other reasons as well. But I've heard of stories when they call, people, not because people who man these call centers are bad, just that the system is overwhelmed. They cannot cope. So we got to fix that. But I'm glad that in the Greater Klang Valley, the army has been brought in, and they have been doing a very good job. When the army come in, everybody pays. Everybody becomes well behaved. Everybody, even me.
Even you? Wow.
Oh, yes, everything. Yes, sir. 3 bags.
Yeah, I think My Sejahtera, they need, there's a lot of things, they probably a lot, of people going on and checking, and so they're very overwhelmed. Even our whole office, we haven't gotten our certificates, the vaccination certificate on My Sejahtera. So on the system, we're not vaccinated at all. It hasn't been updated yet. So it looks like we're not vaccinated, but we have been double dose already. So anyway, there is a question here by Lee Yi Lan. What is the possibility of the vaccine, for example, Sinovac, to trigger a COVID-like infection. He knows of a few cases where they seem to get COVID after 2 times vaccination. I think that was answered already. You can still get infected even though you're vaccinated. But the question is, you could get COVID-like symptoms, I would say, when you're vaccinated. And then I think during the rehearsal, we discussed about how KJ made a comment about during when Shah Alam, I think one of the PPV centers, they had an outbreak. And then he mentioned that perhaps it's because they are vaccinated and so they've got viral load. And so it turns out that they are, positive, or they are detected as positive. So it was something like that. I don't want to share the article here, but it came out in Malaysia Kini and all that. Dr. Jasmine, maybe you want to talk about this since we've discussed it already.
Yeah. So when you get vaccine, obviously some of us might have a reaction to it, some of us don't. So it's highly dependent on the individuals. However, I'm not sure about the COVID-like symptoms. Are you talking about chest pains? Are you talking about shortness of breath? Or are you talking about flu, like or fever? Like most of us actually do have that symptoms when you get vaccinated. Like for me, I took AZ and I had fever for about 3 to 4 days, and also had body ache, just like when I had dengue infection. So it's just a myriad of effects. But the most important thing is, like what Dr. Chris said, is that you have to monitor yourself after you get a vaccine or even after you get infected. And in terms of testing yourself when you get vaccinated, so when you get vaccinated and then you test for example, antigen test, if you don't have COVID, you should not be positive for the antigen test. But if that antigen test shows a positive results, then you are currently being infected, even though you are vaccinated. So I think people need to know about this and be aware about this, that getting a vaccine would not show positive results. Positive results only happens when you actually get the infections.
Okay. Before I forget, and I was gonna go towards the end of the show, but we've got one very important issue that we have not discussed. I think that was ivermectin, and that was brought up in one of the questions. Anyone volunteer to start the conversation on ivermectin?
Dr. Chris. I nominate Dr. Chris.
You have been voluntary.
Just now I smiled, you pick on me. Now I'm not smiling anymore. Doesn't work. You need a randomized control trial for this. Doesn't work. All right, jokes aside, really. Sorry, I'm joking. Doesn't mean it's not serious. Please understand. Now, ivermectin is a newer version of hydroxychloroquine. So if we could go back a year plus ago and we had hydroxychloroquine, everybody was looking for hydroxychloroquine, thinking that it was a wonder drug. And even the Ministry of Health, even people in Sungai Buloh, we used it. We know the data was lacking, but because we were so desperate, there were no antivirals out there, we used this. But thank God, along the way, we wanted to do clinical trials, but when you have an outbreak, it's very difficult to do a big clinical trial at the same time. But we are glad WHO got worried as well, and they started this huge solidarity trial around the world. Malaysia was one of those countries involved. But thank God for that trial, because when the trial was over, we realized that hydroxychloroquine didn't work. Calitra, one of the lopinavir, one of the HIV drugs that was also used to treat COVID, also didn't work. So with that data, Ministry of Health and the ID doctors in the Ministry of Health dropped hydroxychloroquine. Now nobody uses this. We have dropped lopinavir. Nobody uses this anymore. I'm highlighting this because the same thing with ivermectin. During those earlier days, if you watch CNN, you hear Donald Trump and all the people coming on and say, oh, hydroxychloroquine, remember Sarah Cooper? Hydroxychloroquine. And there was a lot. In fact, if you don't use hydroxychloroquine, you will frown upon. It's very similar to ivermectin now. Having said that, I'm not saying ivermectin doesn't work. I'm saying let's do proper clinical trials, then we know. But here, the argument with those who are proponents of ivermectin is this. They believe there's already adequate data out there. And I'm glad I'm sharing the stage here with two academicians, very good scientists. And they will tell you what is the gold standard to decide whether a certain drug or treatment works. At the end, it's good randomized control trials. When you match A to A, you don't match oranges with apples, but you match A to A. They are randomized, ideally, if possible, even blinded, and treated at the same period of time. So don't compare COVID patients treated last year and COVID patients treated this year, because different variants are coming. There are other moving parts. Things have changed. So at the end, it has to be, that is the gold standard. We all learned that in our undergrad and postgraduate training. So for ivermectin, I'm worried that people are asking people to use it now for prophylaxis, and therefore some people take it, ivermectin, for prevention and not vaccinate. And to me, that's a miscalculation, because the vaccines have been proven to work. CNN today, I watched CNN this morning, and Joe Biden has said 99.9% of the vaccinated will not die of COVID. 99.9% is almost 100%. There are some deaths, but very, 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 very few. So this is a certainty. I think all of us here are very sure about that data. But for some people to try ivermectin, which is not yet proven, and miss out vaccination, to me, it's really sad. And watching the people die at hospitals, it's sad. It's an unnecessary death. I say it again, it's an unnecessary death. So I urge the proponents of ivermectin, do a proper study. You might say, oh, you're stopping Malaysians from getting ivermectin. Well, officially today, the government of the day, Ministry of Health included, is not approving ivermectin for anyone, correct? As of today, none. But if we do a clinical trial, half of them will get it. The other half may not get it. You might say, oh, that's bad. Half of them don't get it. But yeah, today nobody's getting it. Surely, if you believe ivermectin so much, half the people getting it is pretty good, all right? But the best thing is, after a few months, whatever time frame of the study, we have more robust data. Then we change. But yes, doing a clinical trial is costly. Somebody has to come in. This trial that KKM is doing now for ivermectin for early categories, category 1, 2, to see how many progress to 4 and above, given ivermectin versus no ivermectin. They call it the ITEC study, involving 500 patients. I think it's a step in the right direction. I do think ivermectin may have some premise if you give it very early, perhaps. But the only way we know for sure is if we did a study. Now, I want to say this. All of us live in this country, and I'm not being political here in any way. In America, you have the FDA. Everybody knows about FDA. Here, we have the NPRA, our Malaysian version. They keep the drugs that come into Malaysia safe for the indication it's been approved. They have been doing this for years and years and years and years. All my HIV drugs that I played with in the 1990s went through that process. We have also heard people coming in, oh, I have this root, take this very good, you bring this ash water, it becomes very good. That maybe some true, maybe some not so true. But the only way we know is NPRA analyzes it, looking at robust data to decide what is safe for the country. So I think we need to keep faith where it should be. We have trusted NPRA for so long. The people there are not political, and I know that as a fact because I've worked with them before. No strings attached and no vested interest. But we cannot cherry pick. When we want them to say A, but they say B, they say they are no good. But when we want them to say A and they say A, they say they are wonderful. I'm sorry, it doesn't go well. So do a proper clinical study, and then we know. To me, I'm just afraid that it distracts people from what needs to be done now. That is, make sure we do our personal SOPs. The bosses, our bosses, those of you like Mona, Big Shot, owns the whole company, make sure your company follows the SOP, all right? The politicians follow the SOP, all right? And let's get our vaccination as fast as possible. To me, that's what we can do now. Ivermectin can do a study, by all means do a study, but I think it just distracts us from what needs to be done. That's my personal opinion.
I want to, sorry, Mona, I want to add also, since usually those who are proponents of ivermectin are also mostly hesitant towards vaccine. It's a bit, for me, I can't brain this because vaccine is free. you should get it, but you have to pay for ivermectin. So there's no rationale behind this. So if you have something that is free, you should get it, take it, and protect yourself and your whole family, rather than taking something you don't know whether it works or not. It works against one microorganism, one type of microorganism, which is the parasites, but we don't know how it works against viruses. So that is two different things. And on top of that, you have to pay your money to get that drug. So now time is hard. Keep your money, save your money, probably buy food rather than putting it into something that you don't know whether it works or not. Yeah, that's my advice.
Okay. Yeah, I just noted what Dato mentioned just now, that the politicians also need to follow SOP. I think that's a very good reminder to them as well as all of us. Yeah, so talking about treatments of COVID, ivermectin was, touted to be one of them. A question, I think it must be from Facebook or YouTube. What are your thoughts about andrographies for treatment of COVID? I'm not sure what this is. I think Thai clinical guidelines include them. Any thoughts on that?
I'm not sure. I can't answer. I'm not sure.
I have very little understanding of that, so I will not be adding good value to this question.
Okay, yeah, probably. I think the person who's asking this, because it's anonymous, I can't see the name. You'll have to do a bit more research on your own, I guess. Andrographies, yeah. So I'm not sure if the spelling is right. Okay, now you mentioned about SOP, and I think that was also one of our questions. And we've got two questions here about SOP, and I think I'm going to combine them. So one person is asking, have we fully understood how the COVID-19 virus is transmitted? In relation to this, what is the rationale behind allowing dine-in for customers to have their meals in a centralized air-conditioned room, and there is a risk of getting infected? And then the next question is, does this virus or the new variants transmit through airborne transmission aggressively? So what is the best precaution on that? And then I'd like to ask you guys, although the government or the authorities are allowing us a bit of leeway in terms of SOPs, we're allowed to have physical meetings, we're allowed to dine in, we're allowed to do a lot of things. But what are your thoughts on this? What should we be doing to safeguard ourselves? Dr. Ashley, maybe you'd like to start on this.
To answer the last question you just mentioned, Mona, regarding whether you should be allowed to go to place to eat, let's create a scenario. You are eating there with a few more people there, and suddenly a person walked in, and he's a symptomatic patient who's still where we can say that he has some kind of symptom, and he doesn't know that he's actually COVID positive, and he's walking into that room. Now, what will happen is that if we were to do something that is not advisable, something like sneeze or cough or anything, he will leave the trail of the virus in that small confined place. That's what my understanding is, a small confined place. And whatever that actually facilitates that droplets or the viral particle to be there in that confined place. And if you, a person who's sitting there and happen to breathe in that air, I'm sure you will take it in. But again, we need to understand that the manifestation of the disease will only occur when your immunity or your immune system is overwhelmed by the dose of infected particles into your system. So in order to answer that in a very short way is, it all depends on how infected the person has actually left the trail in that small confined place. That's my understanding. I don't know if I've answered the question or not.
I think, and when we were discussing earlier, you mentioned about, when you say something is airborne, we have to be careful on what we really mean by it being airborne. So perhaps either yourself or Dr. Jasmine, you want to talk about how it is when we say that it's airborne? What does it really mean?
Dr. Ash, you want me to go ahead?
I think you gave a very good definition the other day.
All right. So when we talk about airborne, we're talking about when someone that is infected go into a confined space or into a room and sneeze or release any particles into the air, and that particles most of the particles will become droplets and drop onto the ground or onto surfaces. But some of the smaller particles, or what we call particulate matter, will linger in the air or become suspended. So these are the ones that will stay for a while. And once that person leaves that room, another person comes in, that person can eventually inhale the particles and get essentially infected. That is why we change the guidelines of why we need ventilation. If we're just talking about droplets transmission, we won't be talking about ventilation, right? Because anywhere, outdoor or indoor, everything will fall to the ground due to gravity, right? But because now that we see there's a possibility of airborne transmission, and we know from a research recently says that Delta variant is 1,000 times more, has 1,000 times more viral load compared to the Alpha variant. So this viral load can actually be suspended in air. So that is why we are advising for better ventilation, packing the HVAC system, and lowering the occupancy of people inside a small room. So when we are eventually allowed out into the real world, having dinner or dining in, I think we still have to adhere to the current SOPs, like double masking and only open up your mask by eating and still washing your hands, maintaining hygiene. And also, obviously, these are people that are vaccinated. But even we are vaccinated, we can still get COVID infection. So we really have to be vigilant on that.
But is it safe then to say that perhaps it's right now it's smarter to actually just avoid confined spaces if at all possible?
Yes, you are absolutely correct, Mona.
Okay, because I know that they allow dine-in, but we're also a bit paranoid, going into a restaurant when it's all confined spaces, because you have to take off your mask when you're eating. So while you're taking off your right, and then you're exposed already, a few seconds.
True.
Oh,
Okay.
you guys can dine in already, is it?
Yes, we can.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, so it's pretty lax here. I lax in that sense. They're giving a bit of looser restrictions on dine in. That's it. But yeah, I think there's a lot of people maybe just take this opportunity because we have been cooped up for so long. But then you're not careful when you don't understand how the virus is actually transmitted. And they say it stays in the air for 15, 16 seconds or something like that. So then, and in that time you're eating, you're already inhaling it, right? How about in West Malaysia, Dato'? How is the SOP right now? It's still very strict, is it?
I'm just going to hospital and going to the shops to buy food. That's all we are doing. Nothing else is open.
Okay, you cannot do anything else.
Yeah.
No.
Okay. All right, so we have gone past 1 hour. There's a lot of questions, and some of them are quite scientific, and some are, just asking about some of the symptoms that they got after the vaccination. I'm not sure if you guys can see the questions on Q&A. If you can type the answer, if you think those questions are, related to you guys, you can do that. I'm sorry if we can't handle all the questions here, but one last one I would like to ask is this question from Dai Lee. What do the panelists see as the end game here? Will we need to be vaccinated every year, or will eventually COVID disappear from our lives, or what's the end game right now?
I want to start with that.
Yes, go ahead.
The thing is that as I was doing some reading, preparing for this particular, I would call this is a public Viva, Jasmine, a public Viva. And
yeah.
And the thing is that I was alarmed to find out that Spanish flu is still with us, and something that I never realized that, and it came in a different form. So to answer Dai's question is that will COVID be with us? I think most probably it will be with us for a long time. But how we are going to manage that, that's something that we're going to look into. And the other part that he asked, the end game, the end game is quite simple, like we have to be vaccinated. We have to be vaccinated, and I think we did discuss this. And Jasmine did mention that if at all we are not going to do the third booster, third shot, no, and we will target critical population group, no, that need this kind of extra protection against the COVID-19. So maybe that may be one of our strategies for endgame, but definitely vaccination is the key thing. Our whole idea is to, at least now we can say something, very good benchmark in polio. We are very close to eradicating it completely from this planet Earth. Very close, but we have not achieved it. Maybe that would be something like what we look at COVID-19 in another 100 years or what, and that's the end game. And vaccination is one of the weapons that we have to answer to Dai's question.
Okay. Dr. Jasmine?
Yeah, Dr. Ashley gave a very good summary, actually. At the end of the day, we want to see SARS-CoV-2 become somewhat endemic, and we are no longer living in restrictions, because technically restrictions should be short-term in public health, should not be something that is long-term, because it's not sustainable. And hopefully we reach that end game towards endemic by probably vaccination. Maybe we need to do it every year, or probably enough, which is a booster shot, or probably 3 regimen shots, whereas they are unsure. But we don't want to see any this pandemic linger longer, and the answer to that is through vaccination. Yeah.
Okay, and I leave the best for last, Dr. Christopher. What's your take on the end game?
My colleagues have already mentioned it. It will be vaccination. There's no other way. I see it going forward. It's going to end up very similar to our seasonal flu. It's going to end up that way. We'll probably need boosters on a regular basis. Vaccines, clearly, as Ashley mentioned, it will be our best tool towards our end game. We just don't know how best to use it now. And over time, we will learn to use it better. I'm sure of it. And the virus will mutate, just like the influenza. Our influenza expert is here, Jasmine. The influenza virus until today, it's mutating all the time. And the vaccines will be tweaked to address those mutations and those variants. And they're already looking at how to have specific ways of tweaking our future vaccines to address possible variants of the future. So we will get better and better in doing it. We also have some pharma companies, I think Pfizer and Merck, is also looking at some antivirals that can be taken as a pill. All right. I think Molnupiravir is one of those drugs. I think it's from Merck. They're still early days testing it, but you can see you'll end up like something like Tamiflu. You take it when you catch flu, you take Tamiflu.
Yes.
Your symptoms. So more and more, it looks as if we are going in that direction. All right. But for now, I think we just have to stand tight. Make sure we vaccinate everybody in our orbit, everybody we know, everybody we don't know, get them vaccinated as fast as possible. And for the time being, until our vaccine rates are really high enough, we have to stick to the SOPs. I know we are sick to it. We hear the words again and again. Every time DG comes and says, takes SOPs, they say, here we go again. But he's right, we have to go back to that. But not just talk about SOPs, but we have to live with the SOPs. I think that's important, all right? We talk about the new norm, but we never really embrace the new norm. Sounds like a nice thing to say, but we didn't really embrace it. We didn't really get it. And I think right across, I mean, you might keep on looking at the politicians and the celebrities. We tend to do that because we are on public stage. But we also have many common people who see COVID in the same way, isn't it? Right? So right across, we just have to keep on doing it. I remember last time I came on, I was pushing these things to you about having some meetings and having a team conference or things like that. I do it on the beach. It's kind of cool. I'm still waiting for you to do it on the beach. The beach will be so really hot, but take us up to the hills and do the open air. That's kind of cool. I'm sure I don't mind having lunch and dinner with my friends from Sarawak, like Ashley. Why not? In the open air, why not? So I'm gonna come and look for you, and Mona, you better take me out. Lots of air to eat nice seafood.
Yeah, open air, okay? No closed, confined spaces where we can get infected. Dr. Ashley, we have to work on this, okay? Okay, so yeah, so that's the end game according to our panelists, how they see it happening with the virus. Get yourself vaccinated, and this is going to be quite some time. We still just have to hang tight and just have to wait for things to, well, it's not going to go back to normal like Dr. Christopher said. We have a new normal now, and we have to live it. We don't go back to the old normal. And we have come to the end game of our program today. And thank you to all the speakers for sharing their knowledge with us today, and that they're the experts on this. I don't know anything about all these antibodies and viral loads and stuff like that. But today I know more. Dr. Christopher, Dr. Ashley, and Dr. Jasmine, thank you so much for sharing with us. And most importantly, thank you, our audience, for being with us today and for sharing your questions so that we understand more what your concerns are. Thank you to TV Sarawak, our partner. So until then, the next one, stay safe. Have a great day ahead, everyone, and take care. See you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you, speakers.
Thank you.
Thank you.